welcome to Miniature Fairy Tales. My name is Carissa and today I'm going to show you how to make these gorgeous little 1/24 scale sofas with 5 cushions. This piece is available for purchase in my Etsy store, or you can also purchase the SVG files to download it yourself. I hope you enjoy. So as always, this is where we start. So all of the pieces have just been cut on my Cricut Maker, and now I'm going to sort them out into their respective piles according to which part of the sofa they belong to. So I'm going through that process now. If you want more information about how to bring SVG files into Cricut Design Space, I do have 2 other videos on my channel which I'll try and link below for you. One shows you how to do it on an iPad and the other shows you how to do it on your personal computer. So I've just frozen this section of the video so that you can take note of these piles that I've made. So I've made one for the top seat cushions, one for the bottom seat cushions, one for the seat bottom and backing, and the other ones are for the arms. And you'll also see that I have my 5 cushions cut out there in their various pieces also. So now I'd like to show you how to put your cushions together. So I want you to turn it over to the side that won't show, and I'd like you to run a thin layer of fabric glue down one side, and then we're going to push that in, and that is going to become a small glued hem for us, and this will sit at the top of the cushion. You can see here it might take you a couple of goes just to stick it over. My suggestion would be, when you're using fabric glue, hold it down firmly for a few seconds to allow it to take, and then you can remove your fingers and it should adhere well. And once you've done that, do the same with the other matching sized piece. The next step in the process is to add a very fine layer of glue down on that same side that you made the hem on. And we're going to do this on the remaining 3 sides of the cushion. And once we have that in place, we're going to add the other side and making sure that the hemmed piece is on the inside. Now this is how I like to do my cushions, but you do have a choice here. Some people like to glue them and wait till they dry and turn them inside out so that it looks more sewn. I personally don't like to do this. I like to glue mine in this fashion, and then once it's dry I like to take my scissors and just give it a quick run around the edges, because the glue provides a bit of a hem so that it won't run. Your fabric won't fray. So it's really up to personal preference how you like to do your cushions, but I'd suggest giving both of these techniques a go and seeing what works out best for your certain style and the way you like to do it. So because of that, I'm showing you both ways in this tutorial. So you can see here I'm doing the hem on these smaller cushions now, and this is the hem that will form at the top. And I'm making this hem on the good side of the fabric, so the side that I want to show. And this is kind of difficult to see, I guess, with this fabric because it's very similar on both sides. Next, you'll see here that I apply glue to 3 sides. Now, these are the 3 sides with the hem. So this is the good side of the cushion that will eventually be showing to the outside. Bear with me, I have a plan. Once it's turned inside out, the hem shows to the outside, but once you fill it with stuffing, the hem is then rolled inward and glued. So that is example number 2 for the second cushion. Now with this next one, I'm going to hem to the inside of the fabric, so that is bringing the hem down on the side of the fabric that won't show. Now I'm applying glue to the layer that will sit on the outside. So the side that will actually show is the side that I am adhering the glue to, and the hem is sitting on the opposite side. And then I bring the other side down and I gently place that on top and put that one aside to dry. So once these variations are dry, you'll be able to see the difference between turning one inside out and not, and also the way that the hem sits. Moving right along, I am working now on my 1000 GSM pieces. I'm working on the side pieces at the moment, and I'm just clearing the edges. There is a little bit of paper that's left from just where the cutting machine didn't go quite the way through, and now you'll see I'm adding some tacky glue, and I am going to glue the 3 pieces together. So 3 pieces together forms one seat arm, and there is also an additional 3 pieces for the other seat arm. So we're just adhering them together now, taking time to push them against the mat and make sure that they're nice and square and even, and if you have to remove any excess glue, then just do that from around the edges. Once I've made both of the arms, I'm now moving on to the seat backing. So again, I'm clearing the edges just for anything that might have been missed, and you can see here I've got some masking tape left over from my cutting machine. Obviously I used the firm grip mat, and I masking taped the edges of my material down when I cut this out with my Cricut. So once those edges are tidied, you can glue these together the same as you did with the seat arms, and just make sure again they're nice and flush with the mat, and that you remove your excess glue from the edges. Once you've made that piece, you can move on to your seat bottom. Now this piece is labelled so that you'll know which one it is. The seat bottom comes with 3 shorter pieces that fit around the bottom of this piece. So these shorter pieces fit to the top of the seat bottom. You can see here that I am laying the longer piece down flat on the mat and pushing that seat bottom piece into it so that I get a nice 90-degree angle. Now with these pieces, this longer piece will sit on top, and the shorter pieces will also sit on top of the seat bottom, and they will fit in on the top edge, and they will fit also into the side edges of that longer piece, which is, as you can see, what I am doing here. Now just have a look at the edges of your shorter pieces. Sometimes the Cricut is out by a mil or so. Just double check if it's sticking out. You might need to just cut a little bit off the edge, but the measurements are correct, so hopefully it will also be correct for you when you cut. And then once you have added these pieces onto the seat bottom, clear away any excess glue with your toothpick. And speaking of glue, you might have noticed that my little bottles have changed from my usual, if you've seen my videos before. So I'm using these fine tip bottles because it really helps me to use a lot less glue, which is important in 124. And if you would like to purchase these bottles for yourself, I got mine at Riot Art, and I think I got them in a 6-pack for quite cheap. They really do have fantastically thin nozzles, pinhead nozzles on them, but you can cut them down to whatever size you need. So I just labelled the lids of mine T for tacky glue, F for fabric glue, so that I can easily see the difference between the bottles when I'm working. Here is how it should look when you're finished. Those two shorter edges should be flush with the edge of the seat bottom. I'm now moving on to the left side back cushion. So you'll see there is a cardstock backing piece and also 3 felt pieces for this part. So I am gluing the piece of cardstock and gluing each of the 3 fabric pieces to the top respectively. So this will give us some padding. I'm using fabric glue for this because fabric glue does not tend to show through fabric as tacky glue would. So make sure they're nice and lined up, and then go ahead and do the same with the right side seat cushion. The next parts we'll be working on are the left and right back cushions for the sofa. So this is the very same process. The only difference is that the felt pieces are tapered. So you'll start with the largest size on the backing, and then you'll add glue to the second smallest size, and you'll add that into the middle of the back of the largest piece. And the same again with the next smallest piece. So what we're building is kind of like a pyramid, and this is to give us a nice tapered effect for our back seat cushions. And now, having done that for both the left and right hand side, we'll move on to the next part, which will be upholstering the side arms for the sofa. So I'm adding a small amount of fabric glue to the front edge of my sofa arm, and I have 4 small parts of felt. So these are meant 1 each for each end of the sofa arm pieces. So you can see here I'm just adding them on to the first arm, and I'll do the very same with the second arm. And the nice part about working in 124 is as one piece is drying, you can move on to the next piece, and so on and so on. So there's not really any stop time in between the pieces, which means that you can construct a little bit faster and you're not left waiting. We're now going to move on to attaching the seat bottom to the seat backing. So this sits flush with the bottom of the seat backing, and it gets attached by its 3 edges. So we're just adding a light layer of glue to those 3 edges, holding things flush with the mat, particularly the bottom of the backing, and pushing those pieces in together. And then using my toothpick to get rid of any excess adhesive that might have built up while we were joining the pieces. Okay, next job is to upholster the outside sides of the arms. So I am applying fabric glue to one full side of the arm, and I'm placing that down from the edge of that piece of felt upwards, and then I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the top and also to the rest of the piece of felt, and using some pressure to keep it taut, I'm going to roll that over the top and glue it down to the other side of the arm. Now you'll notice it doesn't go all the way down, and it's supposed to do that. We're leaving that gap so that that arm can be then glued into the rest of the sofa. So just apply some pressure. It may not take straight away, but again, just like you did with your cushions, just hold it down for a little moment and it will take. So there are 2 pieces of felt, 1 each for each arm of the sofa. The next thing that we'll be doing now is we'll be wrapping what we'll now call the base of the sofa, so that is the backing and the bottom. We'll be wrapping that in our main fabric. So this is the largest piece of fabric that you have cut. So what I'd like you to do is add glue to the full back of the piece. And then I want you to place that probably roughly about 1 centimetre from the bottom, and that is so that we can wrap that bottom underneath to give it a nice finish at the end. So just allow yourself that little bit of room. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make some small cuts right at the corners of that back piece, and that's so that that back piece can fold over nicely to that underside. So we cut those little slits in there, and then we're going to add some fabric glue to the very top of the backing, and using our hands and keeping the fabric taut, we're going to roll that over and just hold it in place for a short moment until it takes. And remember too, with your fabric glue, it's not going to show through like another glue would. So it's okay if it feels a little damp. It will dry and it won't show later. So now that you've done that, add fabric glue to the entire front side of the sofa, the front backing, if that makes sense, and also to the bottom, to where your seat is. And again, holding it nice and taut, roll it over the top and down nice and tight across the back, and nice and tight across the seat bottom. Now I'm fortunate, I have long nails, so I use my nails to get right into that corner to make sure that everything is nice and straight. If you don't have long nails, use something like a toothpick or an awl and really get into that corner. And then once you've done that, you can add some more fabric glue to the front bottom of the sofa, and of course use your mat to hold it tight and really stretch that fabric across the front of the sofa. And again, just like we did with the back, we'll be cutting slits at the corners so that we can then fold that fabric underneath and have a really nice finish at the front. Now we are going to need to make some more cuts in order to be able to wrap well. So we're going to cut at the very corner where the seat backing meets the seat on the sides. Cut that right into where the fabric meets the board. And also we're going to make some small cuts at the top. So at each corner of that top piece, so that level with the very top of the sofa, so that those small edges that we make can fold down and wrap nicely around the sofa. And we're going to set that aside to dry now. And the other thing I did want to mention is you can see I have used stripes as my fabric. Do be aware if you're using stripes or some other pattern about the way that these are cut, because if you cut them the wrong way, then your stripes might be facing incorrectly when you go to put your seat together. So do think about that. The way I've set them up in the design, they will all cut the same way. So they'll cut appropriately for stripes, is what I'm trying to say here. But do be aware about how you place your fabric onto your cutting mat, because this will determine which way your stripes face when you make your piece or your other pattern, or whichever you choose. So moving right along here, we have the smaller pieces for the front and back ends of the sofa arms. So what I'd like you to do is align the bottom of the sofa arm with the with one of the short edges of the fabric, and add some glue to the end and then glue that down, and then add fabric glue to the remaining sides of that piece of fabric and push them into the sides of the arm. And essentially what we're doing is we are marking we're masking the front and the back of the arms so that when we wrap the rest of them later, everything will match in nicely. So do think about, if you're using stripes, where those stripes are sitting on the arms, because in this instance you can see I've got black and white here. If I pin one end of the arm down on a white piece and the other one down on a black piece, they're not going to look like they match when I put the sofa together. So these are just small things to keep in mind if you are using stripes or some other pattern that kind of needs matching up. So you can see here I've got both of my side pieces on now, and I'm going to do the same with the other arm of the sofa. We're now going to make some cuts so that we can wrap the ends of the sofa. So you'll see here I'm making cuts down to where the fabric meets the board, or the felt I should say, and I'm doing 2 cuts at each end, and that is so that we can wrap this. Now I start out with the sides of these end pieces and I wrap both sides down using a little bit of fabric glue. And then once I've done those, I add a little bit of fabric glue to that end piece and I roll that over the top. Now once we wrap these sides with the rest of the fabric, you won't see these, but it is nice to keep it good and tidy if you can, because the ends will show. So we want that to look flush and neat. And of course we'll do the exact same process with the other arm. And here is what I was talking about earlier with making sure that your arms match. So you can see 2 ends have white on them and 2 ends have black. I've done that on purpose because when these attach to each side of my sofa, I want them to match. So I'll make sure that the 2 black ones are facing the front and the 2 white ones are facing the back. So you'll see now I've taken the pieces of fabric that are meant for wrapping my arms, and I have left some excess fabric out the sides for you to be able to hem with glue, which is what I'm doing here now. So I just place the piece into the center of the fabric and I use the piece to determine how much room I've got for hemming, and then I hem in accordingly with my glue. And I always use my piece as a template, just because, you know, by the time you've got the felt on and the ends on, it can always vary in size. So always use a piece as a template, and that way you won't go wrong. So I do that with both pieces here. You can see it's sitting in the center, and I just use my glue to mark out where the top is, or where the closest edge will be, and then I fill in the rest of the excess there with glue and fold it over, and that's how I know that I've got it in the right spot. Now if there's any confusion over which fabric piece is which, you can refer back to the key. For those of you who have purchased this file in my Etsy store, you can refer back to the key that's provided so that you can match up the fabric pieces to the key to understand which goes where. But if you fit them to the pieces once they're cut out, it's pretty easy to also determine which is meant for what. So you can see here I'm wrapping my first seat cushion. So essentially I place it felt down, and I make sure that the fabric is facing down also, and I wrap one side over, I add glue to the backing and I wrap one side over, and then I do the same with the other side, making sure that it's not overly tight but it's not too loose as well. We want it to have a nice firm cushion look. So I'll go ahead and I'll do the same with the other side now, just adding a bit of glue, folding over one side, and I usually use my thumbs or my fingers to roll those over and keep them firm. And then moving on to the other side, adding that glue onto that backing board. So you can see now why we have the backing board, because this is what the fabric adheres to. Using my thumbs there to push it up, keep it firm but not overly firm. We don't want to bend the cushion, we just want to wrap it firmly. And now we're going to do the exact same thing with the seat back cushions. So you'll see this fabric is a little bit shorter. So what I want you to do is allow a little bit more room for the fabric on one side than the other. And that is because these stick up slightly from over the top of the back of the sofa. So I want you to have enough coverage to be able to cover the board. I do like to have some board exposed because it does help with gluing if you decide to glue your backing pieces straight up and down. However, the way that I glue this, I glue them on a bit of an angle, so it's really up to your personal preference. But you will see here when I glue mine, I glue one side a little bit longer over the edge than the other, and that's because that will be the top facing side. And here I go doing the same with the other side. Okay, I have moved back over to my cushions now, and this is the largest cushion that you've seen me make first at the start. So I have some straggly threads around the edges, which I'm now cutting off. And you can see that in my opening here, or if I can get back in the frame, I do have an opening there and I do have a hem, which has been glued. Now at the bottom of the screen, you'll see one of the smaller cushions that I've turned inside out with my brush. This is to show you the variation of what they look like. And I apologise, I didn't actually get the turning process in view of with the camera. It's small and fiddly. But I'm hoping with what you can see, you can make a determination about what you would like to do with your cushions. Now I know what you're about to say. Carissa, why do you have sesame seeds on your desk? Well, this is what I use for filling my cushions, and I was given this tip by Julie Warren, who, I don't know if you've seen her videos, but she is a miniature creator and she's written a few books, and she also has a YouTube channel, so she's got some great hints for making miniatures, and this is one that I picked up from her. So we use sesame seeds in our cushions to give them a fuller, heavier, more, just a heavier look. And it provides more of a heavy look than, say, what some stuffing or filling would. So that's what I use here, and that's what I've used in this large cushion. And you'll see that I used a little bit of fabric glue around the hem that we made, and then I just bring that together with my fingers, and then I also put a ball clip over the top of that just to hold that in place while it dries. Now when you're filling the cushions, just fill them to about maybe half to 3/4 of the way, or somewhere in between that. You don't want to fill it right to the top because that will make it impossible to glue it closed. So just fill, round about half to 3/4 of the way, and then glue and close up the top. Of course, if you live in a household where someone has nut or seed allergies, it's probably not a good idea to use this method, but you can still use regular cushion stuffing or filling, that's no problem. Okay, so popping those aside to dry, we're now moving back to our sofa base, adding some fabric glue to the front remaining fabric and also to the bottom edge of the base there, and I'm just rolling this over and pushing it into the underside. Now if you do have a little bit more excess than what you want, you can always cut that off, and that's not a problem. And you can see I'm doing the exact same thing to the back side here, and just using my thumb to roll that over and push it into the underside. And now you can see I'm going to cut the excess fabric off up to level with the bottom of the seat, and that's because we don't need these pieces now, they are excess. So I can cut each of those off, but no higher than bottom of the sofa. And now making some further cuts at the front corners of the sofa, and this is going to help us again to wrap our fabric around those bare edges. And I'm also making my side excess a little bit shorter, and this is so that when I fold it in, it doesn't reach further than the edge of the board, and that's because if it does, it'll interfere with the other fold on the other side and make it too bulky. So I want it to roughly match the width of that board. So you can see here I've now glued those top flaps and I'm bringing them down. I want to do this first so that they will be covered when I bring in the sides. Once they're down, I'm now adding glue to the fabric, or you can add it into the actual board, and we're going to fold those front edges on the sides back. So that will be the first place that gets folded over. And I apologize, it's slightly out of frame here. Hopefully I'll come back in a little bit better soon. You can see I just dry trialed the side to make sure that everything's going to sit right. And now I am gluing in those flaps down on the bottom sides. So I glue in the smaller side flaps first, and then I bring down the larger top flap down onto the side last, and that gives me a nice flat long finish down the sides. Now if it gets a little bit messy, please don't worry, because the arms of the sofa is actually going to cover this up, but we still do it as neatly as we can so that if there are small parts showing, that they're still going to look very neat and tidy. So this is how the sides of the back should look once you have finished gluing. And you can use your scissors and trim up any excess that you might have. Here's a better view, just in case you need it. And your end result here should be a very well covered, nice, tight, tidy looking seat backing. Okay, now here's how we tackle those bottom seat cushions. I want you to cut slits into the back side of the fabric down to the card, but not over the shorter edge of the felt, if that makes sense. And that's because we're going to add glue to the edges of where you made those cuts, and we're going to fold that over, kind of like what we would do if we were folding a present. So here it is again, we'll do a bit of a close-up. See how I'm cutting right where the corners of the card would be, but not any further around than that, because I want to be able to have that rounded edge so as not to have any gaps or any frayed pieces showing. So I'm adding my glue right to those edges and then folding it over on an angle just like we would if we were wrapping a gift. Hold it in place and allow it to take, and then do the exact same with the other side. And you can kind of see here, this will kind of make a bit of a rounded edge. So as I said, we don't want to see any frayed pieces or any edges when we have the cushion sitting, so that's why we do it this way. I'm doing the same process now to the other seat cushion. So cutting out those squares from the back and making sure that I don't go too far around, adding my glue to the edges and rolling it over with my thumb like a present. If you always think about it like a present, you'll remember that you angle the top to bring it round like this. And I always use my thumbs to roll over the fabric and stick it down, because I find that I have a bit more control that way. You will get covered in glue on your fingers. This is all just kind of part of gluing this fabric down. We kind of rub the glue into the fabric as we're pushing down. But fabric glue does come away from your hands very easily. It just kind of rolls off. And now we have two. And now I'm going to do this exact same process with my back seat cushions. These are a little bit thinner than what the seat cushions are, but it is the same process. You'll just have less of a curve on the ends than what you would have had on the the bottom seat cushions. So go through, make your cuts, and then glue your edges, and again wrap those corners down just like you would with a gift. So there's my first one, and here's my second one. Now I want to show you how to finish the cushions. So it's very, very simple. We're just essentially picturing a triangle on the end, and we are gluing the exposed parts, and then we're folding it over just like we would a gift, holding it down until it takes. And doing the same with the other side. And you can see I glue the edges like a triangle, and I also add a little bit of glue to that inside piece that's showing. And that allows, when I fold it over, for those glued pieces to touch the other side and to be adhered that way. So you can see here when I turn it over, there are no edges showing, there are no frayed pieces showing, there are no cut pieces showing, and it is a very well covered and rounded cushion. And now I use that exact same process for the bottom seat cushions. So again, we're doing that little triangle of glue on either side and adding a little bit of glue to that inside exposed piece, and then just wrapping it over with your thumb like you would a gift. Again, same as before, I use my thumb because I've got more control that way, and it allows me to flatten out the fabric and hold everything down. And once you're done, voila! Okay, it's time to go back to our seat arms now. So we are going to wrap these. So bring the bottom of your seat arm down flush with the edge of that fabric, and then you're going to roll the fabric over the top and make it join on the other side. So add a layer of glue to the side which is fully covered in felt, and I want you to cover that whole side, and then, as I said, bring that edge down flush with the end of the fabric and hold that in place until it takes. And then we're going to add a little bit of glue to the top and some glue to the fabric which we'll be rolling over. and this may not go right to the end, and that's okay. It depends how tight you wrap it. It may almost come down to the end, but you may have a little bit showing at the bottom. That's perfectly fine, because as I said earlier, we're going to have some allowance for it to stick to the side of the sofa later. So now take your toothpick and just get rid of any excess glue that might be peeking out of the edges. But what you'll see now is that it looks almost like it's been sewn this way. Once it dries, it will have a nice edge because we've hemmed it with glue earlier. We have the fronts covered, and so it is certainly taking the shape of a nice upholstered piece. So go ahead and do that very same thing with the other arm. And now that our two arms are covered, we're going to dry trial these on the sides of the sofa. And you can see I've just double checked for which of those ends has black and which of those ends has white. And I'm looking at these to determine which side I like best at the front. And I'm going to make sure that I'm very careful about how these are glued in later, so that I don't have one white side, one black side, and maybe it not looking symmetrical. I'm also sitting my cushions on the top here, just to make sure that everything is still fitting and still looking good. And always dry trialing before I glue to ensure that everything is going to sit as I want it to. I'm bringing in my decorative cushions now, which I've taken out of the ball clips, just to see how they're going to sit on the sofa and to make sure that I'm happy with how they'll rest there as well. Now there are 5 cushions to the piece. There are some other longer ones that sit in with this as well. My filming of these did not go so well, but you can see I've got another prototype to the right of the screen there where the grey cushions are. And you do have the pattern for these, so of course it's going to be whatever fabric you like. But right now, as I said, I'm just testing and making sure that I can have things sitting where I want before I start the gluing process. Okay, so we're going to start connecting our sofa pieces now. So I've got the sofa resting on the side. Now I have dry trialed, so I know roughly where my seat arms come up to. So I am going to glue the side of the sofa only up as far as that seat arm will go. And I will also glue the full bottom side there, and then I'll make sure that I've got the right side going to the right area, because remember I wanted to line my stripes up. And then it's just a matter of lining up your edges and pushing that in. Now you can do this with both sides, and then what I like to do is I like to run some masking tape around it just to hold it in place until such time as the glue takes. You don't have to do this, of course, but it just kind of helps while you're doing other things. So you might see me do that a little bit later on as I'm making my way through this piece. Okay, once they are sitting a little bit more stable, you can go ahead and add in your seat cushions. So just apply a good layer of glue to the back of the piece, and you will have cardboard backing there as well that you can add glue to. And then gently add these in. So you can see here my arms are not quite set yet, but I kind of want to do this all at the same time so that I can manipulate the piece to have things sitting where I want them to. So once those seat cushions are down, I do go back to my side pieces and I continue to hold them in to have everything adhering. Also, I turn it upside down and check the bottom to make sure that the bottom edges of the sofa are connecting with the bottom edges of the side of the base. And that will just make sure that adhesion will occur the way I want it to. Now you may recall earlier I said that I like to glue my back cushions on an angle. So you can see here I am applying glue to the edge of the back of the sofa, and I'm also applying it to the bottom of the back cushion piece. And you can see here I've glued it on an angle so it's not flush with the back, and that's to give it a bit more of a settee look. If it's too straight up and down for my liking, it just appears to be a bit, what's the word, maybe uncomfortable. So I do find that maybe just angling this back piece a bit gives it a bit more of a realistic look. Of course, when you do this, do be careful that there's no cardboard backing showing, which there shouldn't be. I've definitely allowed you enough fabric to be able to cover up everything. And also make sure that you remove any excess glue from the back, and if there's any from the front showing as well. And just give it a bit of a turn round and make sure that everything looks good. And then you can begin adding in your decorative cushions the way that you like them. I have some other maroon coloured cushions here that are roughly the same size as the ones in your pattern, and so I'm just putting everything together to give it a really comfy, cozy look. And of course, after I've fiddled with that for a while, I come up with something that I like, which is this. So after that, I'll take these off and we'll have a look at popping the little legs on. Now, you may choose not to have legs at all. That is perfectly fine with this sofa. I chose legs. I just felt that it added to the look I was going for. And you can see here I've used these small wooden round beads, and I believe the piece that I'm selling whole in my Etsy store, which is the piece I'm making now, is one of the pieces for sale. I've used these legs, but of course you don't have to. You can totally do this without the legs. This is the masking tape I was talking about earlier, just to make sure that long term, like as in overnight, my little piece can sit there and dry nicely. So I add that in, and then once I've done that and I'm happy that everything's stable, I can then go ahead and put my legs on. I just didn't want to do it without being fully sure that the arms were definitely stuck down well. Now just adding a dot of glue to each corner, and this is on the bottom of the arms. And once I've done that, I can take each bead and add that on top of the dot of glue. Now set them aside to dry, and once you're happy you can add on your cushions just the way you like. That now brings us to the end of today's tutorial, and I do hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. If you have enjoyed it, please do give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel, where I'll have more videos like this for you in the future. Until next time guys, have a great day. Bye for now.